Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Esley Greer from Entertainment Fanatic Reviews, back with another episode of What Got You Into Horror? So yeah, let's get started. So first guest on this video is someone I've been watching for about 2 years now, and his Jeepers Creepers 3 review is what got me into his channel. But yeah, he's a really good friend of mine. It's Jason Smith from Sinister Cinema Reviews. So take it away, dude.
So Esley Greer from Entertainment Fanatics Reviews wrote me up and asked me to do a how I got into horror video. And he also asked me to keep it to a few minutes, which if you're familiar with my channel at all, you'll know that that's asking a whole hell of a lot, because my reviews usually last between 20 and 45 minutes. I'm off the cuff, no script, no edits, just yapping for a long time. So here I already waste like half the time that I'm allowed just explaining that. So yeah, how did I get into horror? Well, I was 5 years old, much like most horror fans. I was a very young child when I got into it, and I saw Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, and I was fascinated, and I was immediately a horror fan. I don't ever remember being genuinely scared or anything, more just intrigued. And I had a pretty rough upbringing, but the one thing that my family shared was a passion and a love for movies. We didn't get along in almost any other way at all, and we bonded through film. And it's something that we retained all the way up until we eventually went our separate ways and became estranged from one another. And it's just something that I held on to because it's, I guess, the best part of my childhood is my obsession with film. And horror was the staple of that. It was what I gravitated towards. My brothers were horror fans, not like me, but they did enjoy it, and we had a few select titles when we had a beta player back in the 80s, and that was Halloween. We had Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Friday the 13th Part 5, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you know, we had a few titles and we watched them a lot. And then when VHS became a thing, and we were able to rent them without putting $100 deposit down and whatnot, like you used to have to do for betas, and when VHS first came out, it was not an easy thing. But then when it became the fad, and you could rent 5 movies for 5 nights for $5, later on in the early mid-90s. And that's really when I kind of had my heyday of horror, probably, when I was in my early teens. And I really I would go there and I'd rent like 5 movies at a time, because my mom, she didn't let me do much, but she'd let me rent any movie I wanted, as much as I wanted, as often as I wanted. So I would literally go there every day, and I would rent 5 movies at a time from Video Giant in Huntington Beach, California. And I would just take them home, and I would just go to the horror section, and I just grab everything with the coolest poster art, because poster art is king, something that's unfortunately dying a terrible death in film today. And I still gravitate towards a cool box art. But the Video Giant days, the days of Blockbuster, the days of just hunting down the horror section in the old VHS video stores. Great memories, and they will always stick with me, and they are responsible for my passion and my love for horror. But if you go back to the very beginning roots of it, it started with Halloween, and I guess that stays true today, since it is still my favorite horror movie almost by default. But I happened upon a good one because it still is one of the greatest horror movies I've ever seen, objectively as well. So it wasn't like I got into some shit movie that I still, try to contend is the best horror movie, and it's like, dude, that's nostalgia. Like, no, it just so happened to be legit one of the greatest horror movies of all time. So I kind of got lucky there. But I won't ramble too long. I will cut it here. I could talk about this subject for days. Thanks to Esley over there. That's awesome that he's doing this. I think that's a really fun idea, because I think that there will be some similar threads that you'll see running throughout all these how did you get into horror. And then of course there will be some differences as well, which is what makes us individuals and what makes us interesting. So I look forward to seeing what other people have to say. And I went over my time. Not by much though. I did good. Yeah, so thank you to everybody. And I'll let you get back to him. Adios.
So 5 years old, watching Halloween. I don't think I've seen Halloween until I was like 8 or 9, and even then it was on a cassette tape and I didn't get to watch it in full. But regardless, I also had a rough upbringing as well, and me and a few family members bonded over film. And there was another family member that did watch films with us, but they were never interested in films much. But what can you do? Video rentals, places like Blockbuster and all that would have been cool to visit. And you were so right about poster art. That's what always draws me to a certain 80s cheesy fest of a horror film, I didn't see Halloween until I was 8 or 9, but it's cool that Halloween was your first horror film, but I find it to be highly overrated, but we're not here to debate over that. This is not Killer Flicks. But yeah, I do like it, but maybe I need to rewatch it. Maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know. But yeah, your speech on other people's stories, that is exactly why I started this whole series, and it's going to be an ongoing series until this channel is dead. But yeah, thank you so much, Jason, for being a part of this video, and sorry it took so long to actually make this video, but thank you again. So my next guest is a good friend of mine, Stephanie Beaton, so take it away, Stephanie.
How I got into horror, that is a really good question. When I was about 4 years old, my first horror film that I vividly remember was Phantasm. And the most scariest scene to me was the gnomes that were underneath the bed. So every night after watching that movie, I would look underneath the bed before going to sleep, because I was so scared that there was those gnomes, because in the scene where they come up and they capture the kid in the bed was just terrifying to me, but I loved it. And of course, the ball with the tall man, and when the ball hit that guy in the forehead and all the blood was just like spraying out, I was fascinated with the blood. So Phantasm was the first horror film that actually got me into horror, because I just, it was scary and it was like bloody to me, and I was just like, oh my god, I just kept watching that and I was fascinated. So that was my first real thrust into horror, so that got me hooked on the horror. And then I always would get the Fangoria magazines when I was a kid and just be fascinated by the blood and the guts and the pictures and how did they do that, and just all into that. So growing up in Ohio, I got the Fangoria magazines every month, but I wanted to become a veterinarian. That was my goal in life until I moved to California, and then I wanted to be a actor. So besides, doing some commercials and, little commercials here and there and some modeling stuff, my first film that I auditioned for was a horror movie, and it was called Unnaturally Born Killer, and I absolutely loved it. Shooting it and doing the death scenes and the torture scenes. Absolutely loved it. Did I go out and audition for other types of roles like comedy or drama? Of course I did. But for some reason, horror seemed to be following me everywhere. And I say that with every sense of the word. So I started getting in the magazine circuit. And with the magazine circuit, I had other directors in horror and writers in horror contacting me and wanting me to be in their movies. And so there it was. I ended up doing a ton of horror films. I just was in that whole circuit of the horror genre, and that's how I ended up getting into horror. Not just on a personal level, that horror is my favorite type of film to watch. Like, I'll take horror movies any day over any type of movie. But as far as like my acting and my career, I just kept getting contacted from one horror director to another. And next thing I know, I've done a ton of horror films. It wasn't something I sought out to do. It just found me. And that's how I got into horror.
So, Phantasm. I hate to break it to you, but I've never seen Phantasm. Sorry. Maybe you can send me a copy of it. I don't know, but yeah, it's that's a franchise I always wanted to get into, but never got around to it, unfortunately. And Fangoria, I've never owned one of those magazines. I've always wanted to. Never owned one. I know, that's really sad. And veterinarian to actor, that's interesting, but you moved to California, so it makes a lot of sense. And that's cool that horror follows you. That's really cool. So thank you so much for being in this video. I know you sent me your bit like a month and a half, 2 months ago, but thank you once again for being in this video. And so on to the next guest, my good friend Steve Reed from Evil Stevel. So take it away, Steve.
Hello everyone, I'm Evil Stevel, and I'm here to tell you what got me into horror. So as far back as I can remember, my parents have always been into horror movies. I remember when I was really young, like probably 3 or 4, them watching horror movies on TV, and I didn't even know what they were. Stuff like Dracula and Frankenstein and Night of the Living Dead and stuff. And yeah, I didn't really pay attention. But one night, my aunt came over and she was babysitting me. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and she put on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. This is the very first horror movie I actually sat down and watched and paid attention to, and it scared the crap out of me. I did not sleep all night that night. My mom was up with me, and she was kind of pissed off that my aunt let me watch that at such a young age. But it definitely left an impression, because after that, I wanted more horror. So I watched whatever I could on TV, whatever my parents would let me. And about 2 years later, when I was 7 or 8, I saw Halloween for the first time on USA Network, because they used to have a thing every Halloween where they would play that movie. And I remember just thinking, wow, this is one of the most amazing things I've ever watched. I loved it so much. And then about a week after that on Cinemax, my dad used to work, and me and my mom would stay up late and watch horror films. I saw Return of the Living Dead, which was the very first zombie movie I ever saw. And that just blew my mind. I remember just being amazed and laughing at the comedy in the movie, and just thinking, wow, movies like this exist? This is awesome. So, yeah, ever since then, probably from around 5 to around 8 years old is when I really started getting into horror. And after that, it was all horror all the time, honestly. I tried to get like horror comics and horror magazines and whatever I could get my hands on, just to find out more and watch more horror films. And just, I've loved horror ever since. So yeah, that's how I got into horror. I hope you enjoyed my little story, my little trip down memory lane. Thanks for listening, and I will see you later.
So your parents got you into horror. That's really interesting, because my mom is the one that got me into horror. For all the classics that I love, she's the one that got me into them. But 5 or 6 years old, watching Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, I was never allowed to watch a Nightmare on Elm Street film until I was like 14 or 15. I mean, given I saw Freddy vs. Jason with my mom, but she didn't count it as a Nightmare on Elm Street film. And I did see the remake at a friend's house, but she was pissed about that too. But I was 11 at the time, but still. But Halloween, yeah, I'm not going to get into that much, because I already said that with Jason's bit. Return of the Living Dead. Never saw that either. Always wanted to, which I heard it's a fun franchise, but like I said, never got around to it. But it's a horror comedy or a horror-comedy. I love those type of films. One of my favorite zombie films is a horror-comedy. Dead Snow 2 is really good. You guys have to check it out. And so thank you again, Steve, for being a part of this video. And so on to my good friend Need Gore. So take it away, bro.
Hey yo, It's your boy Need Gore. And how did I get into horror? Well, I'll tell you. I was introduced to horror movies at a very young age, as most horror nuts were. They experienced sheer terror at the hands of generally a universal monster movie. Probably Frankenstein was one of the first films that I had seen. I was more enthralled with the artwork. I was always interested in drawing things that looked very realistic, and there was nothing more appealing than drawing a monster or something that wasn't necessarily human, because you kind of had a free-flowing process of creating monsters. So I was very much into horror movies, but I was very into monster books and horror comics, Tales from the Crypt and Wolfman, and certain things like that got me into wanting to create horror art. But my mother showed me films like Friday the 13th, and Friday the 13th Part 2, and Halloween, It, and The Exorcist, and so on and so forth. Once we got through the basics of horror, it seemed that she noticed that I had a knack for enjoying horror movies, weird stuff. So we went to the Hollywood Video, and I watched Reanimator for the first time, and I would say Reanimator is sort of what really got me into the obscurity of horror movies. And it was all downhill from there. I ended up being an actor and doing stage productions and continued drawing, and then I sort of got away from the genre, and then I had a resurgence once I watched the movie Pieces, and I kind of grew a deep appreciation for films that weren't necessarily scary or perfect in the sense of film and cinema, but were just really fun. You know, they were projects that had a lot of passion in them, and I learned to appreciate every style of filmmaking, no matter how sleazy it gets. I find the good in film. So that's it. That's how I got into horror movies, and I'm very happy I got to participate in this tag, and I'm sorry it was so late. But with that being said, my name's Need Gore, and you are awesome. Thank you very much. Y'all watch something scary today. Peace out.
Universal Monsters and the Classics. Okay. I saw Frankenstein for the first time the other day, and I was a bit disappointed with it because I've always wanted to see it, but I'm gonna have to get into that with my review. And I've never seen any of the other original Universal classics. I really want to, but those sets at Walmart are a little too much for me, especially since I'm jobless. I used to draw myself. Well, not myself, but I used to draw. And, I used to look at a picture and draw something. But back when, art came from my mind, it was always horror related. Like, if I drew something without even knowing what it was going to be, it would always turn out to be horror related. I haven't seen those sketch pads in years, and I know I do not have them here. But that's cool that, like, the main thing that got you into horror was art and comic books and all that. That's really cool. And your mom got you into Friday 13th, Halloween, and It. So did my mom. And I never saw Reanimator, which I wish I did, but never got into those movies either. But yeah, horror movies are fun. I've never been on set, but I've tried to make a few things, and I've always had a blast making them. Regardless if they're skits or sketches or whatever, always fun to be a part of, and I wish to be on set or be an actor one day. But yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this video. He's a really chill dude. Subscribe to him. Subscribe to everybody in this video. So yeah, with that said, if you found any entertainment in this video, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to be a part of this series, let me know in the comments below, because I always have fun having more guests on the show and people that I've never collabed with, and collabing with them. That's always fun. And with that said, don't be scared. To like, comment, subscribe, and share would be highly appreciated. And peace.